Kiernan, my amazing friend and business coach and sparring partner. We're just, going to get into it and I'm so excited.
Yay, this day has finally come. I feel like we have been talking about this for so long.
I know.
I know.
And sometimes I listen to your voice notes that you send me and I'm just like, the world needs to hear this message and the
Oh,
world needs to hear just the advice that you give is so transformational and so nurturing and it's just like
oh.
so there's a lot of things I want to discuss today. We're going to go into becoming bold,
Mm,
our own journey and how we feel like other people who are listening can become bold.
hmm.
So first off, can I get you to give us an intro?
Yeah, for sure. And of course, the minute you ask me that, I'm like, I have no idea who I am. I have no idea what to say. Who am I? Okay, well, I will, I guess, yeah, talk about my identity based on what matters most to me. I'm Amy, a mother to a 6-year-old boy. I'm also somebody that really cares deeply about the meaning in things. I love reading. I love getting kind of into the deeper things, like not
Mm,
accepting the surface level answers, but really understanding what matters to people, what makes people tick. I'm fascinated by psychology and philosophy. I've spent 20 years of my career pretty much all in sales. I started off in advertising sales. So I don't know if you know, do you know Hot Press magazine? Do you remember Hot Press
I think I
magazine?
do.
It's been around for a long time and it's like an indie music. That was my entire career, advertising
Yeah.
sales. Yeah. And so I started with Hot Press and then I moved into Harmonia, which is, for anyone that's listening to this in Ireland, it would be like Tatler, like Irish Tatler, You
Oh.
Magazine, Food and Wine. My now husband and I moved to Canada and I ended up
Mm.
becoming part of the launch team to launch Twitter in Canada, in Toronto. And I actually remember when I joined Twitter, which is going to make you laugh. So, do you remember Jerry Ryan, the radio guy?
Oh yeah, of course. Jerry
I had
Ryan.
this, yeah, I had this terribly shameful crush on him back when he was younger. I know, come on, he
That's
wasn't.
okay, girl. We don't shame. Girl, this is it. Look, everyone has a person that they
Well, he's not
fancy.
my person, but he was definitely,
He
he
was
was.
back then. My first crush was James Bond Jr., who's a cartoon character. So just if that
Who
makes
is
you
he?
feel
What's
better.
he in? What's he in?
He's James Bond Jr., he's a cartoon
Oh, James
character.
Bond Jr. Oh
Yeah.
my God, so
He's just
funny.
a
I
little
have to
guy
go and
with
look at that.
spiky hair and cool trainers. And I just thought he was, so hot when I was
I
like
know.
8.
I say this because it was when he died that I joined Twitter because I wanted to know like what people were saying, and it was like there was a huge amount of conversation around it. It was very hush hush, like people in RT were not talking about it. So I joined in 2009, and then it was 2013 when I was in Canada joining as part of the launch team. And we were in this tiny little room, and I remember the interviews, and I remember going in wearing a full on suit, like a pantsuit. It was like a, it was a cute, like, not lilac. It was like a purpley gray, which I felt
Mm,
fabulous in, but like,
great.
I would never wear a suit. I like a bit of a blazer though.
I
Like
think
maybe I
that's why
would
you
wear
got
a
the
suit
job
again.
though, because you probably felt great and you walked in, you were like, yeah, I'm a
Maybe,
badass Irish queen.
maybe. From a marketing perspective, Twitter was very groundbreaking. It was
Yeah.
the first time anyone had a dialogue with their customers directly, really,
Yeah.
where people would actually tweet about their experience with a brand. And that was groundbreaking. I mean, you're talking 12 years ago. And obviously,
Yeah.
we had Facebook as well, but Twitter was where you went to complain
I know I
and you
did a
went to
few tweets and it worked.
same, same,
No, I don't want to be that
absolutely.
person. But it
It
was
was the
very,
way
very
that you got
effective.
through to people.
Yeah.
And even you would tweet about people if you liked them too. So there was the
Mm,
good side of it as well. But it was a huge shift in marketing, as you can imagine, because
yeah.
instead of it just being like, okay, we're going to design an ad. It's typically going to be a TV spot, 30 seconds long. We're going to push it to people that we think, are part of our target audience. And the target audience is basically just a proxy for people we think are interested in our products. And
Mm,
instead of that, what Twitter did was it allowed you to speak with them. There was a push
yeah.
pull. There was a pulling in, which was very different. So I loved it because it was still advertising sales, but it was tech, it was social
Mm,
media, it was very new. And so I was part of that team and I stayed there for 11 years, post Elon,
yeah.
stayed about 18 months after Elon came in with his sync.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
think, yeah. Hilarious,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah. And we were so excited. Like, I don't know if you remember this, but we were excited initially when he was coming in because we thought that he would be groundbreaking and amazing.
Were we excited?
I was like, I kind of thought, I
Okay.
think a lot of us were
No,
like,
I was a little bit. I was. But I think I also was like, that's just the sing thing is so ridiculous. And I did have a few, because
yeah,
I worked in the DE&I team at the end.
mm,
And I just had a very strong feeling about what was coming. But
yeah,
yeah, we won't get too deep into that because I don't have capacity to be getting any
I know.
negative comments from, disclaimer, I have signed an NDA, Amy has not. So we will touch on Twitter points, but only within the NDA. But it was an amazing place to work. And yeah, so let's talk about that. So you left Twitter after 11 years and you moved back to
Mm,
Ireland because I also relocated back to Ireland for the Twitter job at the end of
hmm
2021 from Berlin. And I actually wished at the time that there was a podcast out there where people would, even just one
hmm
episode to help me make sense of that move. So will you talk me through the move back to Ireland? How did that feel? What was the decision behind it?
Yeah, and that happened before actually all of the Twitter X change, which was very good for me. So I was in Toronto at the time, and it was actually COVID. It was 2020 when I started to think about moving home. And I had returned from work after maternity leave in 2020. So I literally was in the office like 8 weeks, and then it was like, bye, you're going home now. And so that was like head spinning. But when my grandfather passed away in September 2020, Granda Harry, and I couldn't go to his funeral, and I had to watch it on Zoom, which was horrendous.
God.
But I'm glad I got to watch it. But like seeing my mom and like seeing my entire family and just like not being there, it
Mm,
was so disconnecting and unreal. And I was like, I can't live this way. Pardon me. I can't live this way. I don't want to be so isolated. And, this was 9 months into COVID where we were,
mm,
not able to leave. And I had a toddler at the time as well. He
mm.
was just coming on to 2. And I had a really nice maternity leave the year before when he was a baby. But then, as a like toddler, they arguably need even more stimulation, going out and meeting
Yes.
people, being around family. It was important for me to have him be surrounded by people other than my husband and I who love him and who he
Mm,
feels safe with.
yeah.
And, it just obviously COVID changed all of that. And so it was COVID that made me start to think about moving home. And my husband was supportive and interested, like he's Irish too. And so we started to put the plans in place. And I was very lucky that I actually moved with Twitter. We actually made the move in September 2021. And I regret nothing about it. But I think with all change, there is an identity shift. And we've talked about this before, where change happens and you almost assume that you can recalibrate immediately and that you can be like, okay, I live here now. And I think anybody that has moved knows that that's not the case
Yeah.
and that it is way harder than that. And it takes months for the move or the change or whatever that might be to actually settle into your bones and to feel
Mm,
real and to feel
yeah.
like you believe it and that you actually do exist in this new world, in this new identity.
Yeah. I think for me, when I moved home, like, because I hadn't lived in Ireland since I was 23, 22, and I hadn't lived in my hometown since I was 18. So it was such a shock to the system. There was so much about it that was so nice because I obviously was like way older and way more grown and had a much, I don't know, I just had I'm just a completely different person, obviously, to the person I was when I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I approached being at home in a different way. But it is a really unusual feeling to go back and live in Ireland after living away for so long.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many things that we take for granted when we are at home around our loved ones. And if you never
Mm-hmm.
leave, and it's just those little things like I remember any time I would pop in to see my sisters for a coffee, just feeling so grateful that this was a thing I could do. Like just and seeing the kids, my niece and nephews, like that for me was so unbelievable. Obviously I left again, I came to Bristol because
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I felt for me, I kind of felt like I had to have a separation. It just depends on what type of person you are. For me, it was kind of like a lot of distraction, and that was the main thing. And a lot of people's expectation on me that I wanted to just get rid of. I just wanted to like decide who I was myself and go
Mm-hmm.
out into the world. And that's what I found really powerful about moving away and living in another city or country. And I absolutely recommend that everyone does it if you can, just to
Mm-hmm.
live somewhere else away from the people that have known you for your whole life so that you can just at least form like a true identity and live in
Hmm.
an authentic way to yourself and the life that you want to live. And I want to touch on something that I've been thinking about relating to what you do now. Share with us what you're doing now. I want to really talk about this really important thing that you did for me in my life, this breakthrough that you gave me. But yeah, I'll
Mm.
let you do that first because then it gives context.
Oh, okay. Well, I moved home and I stayed with Twitter, and I stayed with them through the transition with, Elon Musk taking over, and, things shifted. There was a lot of layoffs as well as attrition. So my role, changed quite dramatically. And for a finish, it felt like I had been there. I was able to maybe support, I really wanted to support the team through this huge change. And so I felt like I did that. And then once that felt settled, I didn't feel like I was able to give any more impact. Like, and it had been a really
Mm,
good run. I had been there for 10 and a half years. It had changed dramatically. It had grown a lot since the days of launching it. And so I was
mm,
very ready to say goodbye and to move into something new. And so I finished with Twitter X last February. And I deliberately took some time. I'm doing a master's at the moment in coaching, and I've been doing coaching for quite some time. So executive coaching, group coaching, things like that. Most, I would, maybe this is a big assumption, but like a lot of sales teams will have coaching and learning and
mm,
development. It's a wonderful way to invest in your people, and the results are very obvious. And so I did a lot of coaching as when I was at Twitter, and I think it was like 7 years when I did my first coach training. And so I was very lucky in the sense that I had this to be able to do
mm.
while figuring out my next move. I had started a master's degree as well, so I was meeting great people. I was specializing. I'm writing currently my thesis, which is specializing in confidence. And just recently, I've been kind of understanding what is the right move for me next. Is it to go back into the corporate world? Is it to explore and build something new? And for
Mm.
me, what's really calling me, what's feeling aligned, and what's just emerging as something that's kind of suiting my lifestyle too, being a mother of a 6 year old and wanting to be around for him. I mean,
Yeah,
flexibility, autonomy, it's really important. I found it difficult to come home, be in Cork, and go for jobs in Dublin because there's
yeah.
obviously this huge demand to return to the office, which I'm not against. I do think it's lovely to have people be together. I have huge, like wonderful memories of being right in my office, in Toronto with all of the old folks that I used to work with. So definitely not against being in the office per se, but I found it to be when I started to explore returning to a new, role or going for a new role, I found it quite restrictive, especially being in Cork, which is a real balls because Jack Dorsey said we could work from home forever, and
I
I
know,
believed
my
him.
God.
I
Don't
believed
don't
him. I was a
even, girl.
I was a
The
fool.
panic when that was announced.
I know I was a fool. But I did believe him, and I did think, I don't know, I must have thought that I was going to be with Twitter forever because I just loved it so much.
Mm.
And so anyway, it was challenging, to find a role that would suit my need for flexibility as a mother. And my values have shifted. Before it used to be achievement was everything to me. Like it was, everything that we're conditioned to believe that the more
Mm.
you climb the corporate ladder, the more worthy you will be. You will finally feel like you're enough, that you deserve all your success that you are having. And I just don't believe that really anymore. Like I've just
No.
changed, my belief system has changed, my mindset has changed around that. I think if somebody says that that's what success is, like I think a lot of that is just optics. Is it
Yeah,
really like aligned success that's like somatic in your body? I don't know. And everyone's different. Everyone is different and
yeah,
everyone has their own path. But for me, I wanted to do something that felt very aligned to where I am in the world, but also it enables me to give back what I've learned, in the 20
yeah,
years that I've been in sales, and I've, been doing coaching for about 7 years. So now, and I'm very much in the kind of beginning stages of this, I'm combining three kind of things. So my years of sales experience, my coaching, and then my kind of specialization in confidence. And I'm working on a new sales method. So something that I haven't seen before. I haven't been able to find. I've been through a lot of coach training or sales training. I've been through a lot of learning and development. I was very privileged to be able to go and have great education through Twitter and through previous employers. But for salespeople specifically, it can veer to the bro, like to the
oh
very
my God.
masculine, the very aggressive. If you actually
Yeah.
search YouTube, like sales coach on YouTube, it's a wild world out there with like I think people, if you're in this world, will know exactly what I mean. And for some, that's great. But for others,
Yeah.
for the more introverted, for the neurodivergent, perhaps, for
Mm.
the people who don't respond to the pushy kind of, very tactical, high pressure way of sales coaching, or for maybe companies that just do learning and development, as in like, I'll just teach you about the product and you can just figure out how to go and sell it then.
Yeah.
I just feel like there's something missing. And so that's what I'm going to try and do. That's what I'm working on doing, is bringing together the sales, the coaching, the confidence, and working on the inner world of the salesperson,
Yeah.
and making, supporting people who sell for a living in feeling resilient, adaptable, confident, ready to go into conversations with clients, feeling really good about
Mm.
themselves,
Yeah,
working
I
from a
love
place of
that.
abundance, right? Like
Yes,
not being
abundance is
afraid.
so, yeah.
Yes. And not being afraid of silence. Like that's a huge one. Like being able to
Yeah.
go into a sales conversation and be curious. And actually, this is funny because we learn this in coaching as well. Being comfortable with the not knowing, because that's where
Yeah.
learning exists. That's where learning is possible. If you go into something and you're like, oh, I already know all about this, there's no
Yeah.
learning that's going to happen. So like, but we
Mm.
do it because we're afraid, and we do it because we feel like we need that to feel safe and secure and valuable. But if you
Yeah.
actually can let that go and you can just step into, I don't know what's going to come up, but I trust in my ability to handle it,
Yeah.
it's very powerful, and it's a very different conversation, and it's much more rooted in the real,
Yeah.
issue of whatever the buyer is coming in to talk about.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
I love that. And I think that's so needed. And especially if you're running a business, as we know, you have to be good at sales. And my business is helping people to build their personal brands on LinkedIn. A lot of people that I work with are entrepreneurs, small business owners, solopreneurs. And a lot of people that I work with really struggle with sales, this direct selling. And I'm kind of like, my whole thing is make the garden beautiful and the people will come to you. So add loads of value,
Mm-hmm.
become someone that people attach value to because you write amazing content, because you have already figured out who your target audience is. You understand what their common problems are. Every single ICP or person in your target audience is going to be kept awake at night due to some, or they're going to have some problems that they're constantly thinking about solving, whether it's a goal, a KPI, and they're all going to be very similar. If you're selling to a head of people, the things they're going to be worrying about are going to be attached to the macroeconomic environment, which is like
Mm-hmm.
whatever it looks like now. And you're going to be able to figure out what those problems are. And I think I always say, if you're writing valuable content that tactically, tangibly gives them insight and gives them advice on how to solve those problems, you're just going to become an extremely valuable person, and the clients will come to you. And that's what is happening with me. Clients come to me,
Mm-hmm.
they slide into my inbox. But within that as well is like, I'm very comfortable now sending someone a message, a cold message on LinkedIn, if I
Mm-hmm.
maybe want to work with them, because I'm really confident about my LinkedIn presence, my LinkedIn page. But I'm also very confident about the value that I can bring people.
Mm-hmm.
And we speak a lot about this, obviously, me and you all the time, about confidence. And I know I'm running my Becoming Bold program, you're part of it. Building confidence very much comes as well from your community,
Mm-hmm.
which I'd love to dive into a little bit, because I think there's people out there who maybe don't even realize that they're lacking confidence,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just feeling a bit icky about the thought of selling something or talking about their business. What would you say to that type of person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's natural to feel fear, first of all. I think that I
Yeah.
would acknowledge and validate and give permission for the like, as in not me giving permission, but maybe encourage them to give themselves permission to feel that
Mm.
emotion, that feeling. It's natural. We want to belong. We want to feel accepted. We want to feel okay. We want to feel safe. We don't want to be rejected. Like these are all very natural feelings, and they make sense. They
Mm.
don't feel great, and they're a protective instinct that we have going back to the prehistoric days.
Yeah.
That is just a very natural way of wanting to protect ourselves. But I think what I would say is, and this, I did a podcast episode on this recently, actually. What I would say is that the feeling of fear is one thing, and the decision to take action is another. And they
Mm.
don't have to be dependent on each other. So you could, and it's a cliche, feel the fear and do it anyway, but I'll go into, I guess, more detail about what that means for me, or just the deeper meaning for me. So we are the thinker of our thoughts, right? We're not our
Mm.
thoughts. We're the
Yes.
thinker. We're the awareness behind the thoughts. We're the awareness behind the feelings. We're the awareness behind the emotions. And they happen and they come, and we can permit and we can validate and acknowledge them. We don't have to run, kind of screaming from them. But we can also say that I am feeling fear. I am feeling anxiety. It's not I'm anxious. I'm fearful, right? Like there's a
Yes.
difference in the language there. So if you can separate yourself from the thought, from the fear, from the emotion, and then move into that observer role of being, the awareness versus the right in it, like the thought, it creates a huge amount of spaciousness, expansion, and from there, you're able to make an intentional choice. So fear typically shows up when we're trying something new. That is to be expected. And
Yeah.
so if we are aware of that, we can expect it, but we can move into the observer position and say, we're the awareness behind the feeling. We can separate from it and we can make that intentional choice of what we want to do. So in my case, I am launching a new business. It's a
Yeah.
space, I'm not new to elements of it because I'm bringing in things that I have done before. So there is an element, of course, of confidence, like, my experience or my coaching experience or whatever. But it's still stepping forward and allowing myself to be seen in a
Yeah.
new iteration of myself, which I haven't had the time or the benefit of just like playing around in for a while. So there's always going to be an element of fear to that. However, I have decided based on my value system that I want to do this. I
Yeah.
want to live a life of flexibility, but also creativity. I want to build something. I feel called to support the more introverted salesperson, the more
Mm.
neurodivergent salesperson, perhaps, who just doesn't respond to, the traditional types of sales coaching. And so I have a very strong and purposeful sense of why I'm doing this, and it's rooted
Mm.
in my value system. And not just for what I'm giving out, but also in the way that I want to live. I want to be flexible. I want to be able to pick up my son from school. So all of these things are showing me that the action is important to me. It's really
Yeah.
important to me. And so having both of those things side by side, the fear, which is again natural and will show up typically when you
Yeah.
try something new, and on the other hand, the action that is rooted in your values, they can be separate. They can both
Mm.
exist at the same time. And so I, it's funny, like I get a bit outraged at myself because I won't let myself tell myself what to do. It's complicated. It's a complicated thing. But if I can essentially say to myself, this is really important to me. I want to live
Mm.
this way. I want to build a
Okay.
business this way.
Okay.
I will not live a life where fear gets to dictate my choices in that matter. It's
I
just
love
not it's
that.
not an option for me.
Yeah. But I love that. But again, like all of this comes from a lot of self work. And
Mm,
I worked so hard on my mindset in the last year, especially after the
hmm.
layoff. And after, well, the layoff was actually nearly, I think, 2 years ago now. Jesus. And yeah,
Time
because,
flies.
excuse me, because I also was wanting to go out on my own and do
Hmm.
something different. And I think as well, it's understanding, as you said, your values. And for
Hmm.
me, my value was I want to be financially free. I don't want to rely on anyone
Hmm.
and independent. I do not want to rely on a toxic boss that pays my salary that I have to be tiptoeing around
Hmm.
and getting anxiety every time they ping me on Slack. Like, there are so many people out there living that reality.
I know.
And the other thing I wanted is to be in control of my life and my time. And
Mm,
I have never been happier. I wanted to be free. I wanted to be bold. I wanted to be bold on LinkedIn. I wanted to talk about the things I want to talk about. I wanted to have my own podcast, which is here,
hmm.
talking about all the stuff I care about and being my very authentic, true self. One of the things, going back to what I said earlier, that you showed me early on was that you actually can build a life and a career and a business around something that you love.
Hmm.
And I think for me, obviously, we worked together at the beginning, and you came to my first pilot LinkedIn group program, and it was such a blessing to come across you because I mean, I know that we kind of instantly just connected when you were in the
Hmm.
program and on the call, and I was like, oh my god, I need to get to know this wild Amy from Cork, another one of us.
Another
And
one.
it was like we were obviously kind of a match made in heaven.
Hmm.
And yeah, when we spoke and you just helped me, like, it's so important to have a coach or a thinking partner or just someone that you can sit with and that asks you really difficult questions. That's like, you know, I started off doing more content production and copywriting for people on LinkedIn. And actually, that's not what I wanted to do. Like, as much as I love writing content, I do it now and again for one or two clients. But really, I want to be coaching and guiding people so that they feel empowered to do the work themselves, so that they have the system set up to be like, okay, I'm going to bash out a week's worth of content. I'm going to sit down and do it. I have my whole bold framework. I can go through it bit by bit. All the prompts are really helping me, whatever. And you showed me how to do that. And I think, you know, it is so important to allow someone in. You said something to me before. I can't remember how you phrased it. We are all limited by our own knowledge and our own thoughts. Do you remember saying that to me? I think it was
It's
in a way.
the language quote about from Wittgenstein. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
what was it again? It was the limits of our language are the limits of our world, or something like that. I think
I just got
something
goosebumps. That
something
is
like that.
so, but that's so true. And when you
Mm.
don't have language for something, you can't really
Yeah.
solve it, or you can't
And you
really
can't
make
do it
sense of it.
alone. Like you said, I also have this, it's not mine, it's from somebody I follow on Threads. His name is Paul Scrivens, I want to say. He's a pretty good follow. He says that it's very difficult to grow when you're only in conversation with yourself.
Yes,
I
it's
mean, to
impossible.
be honest, it's impossible.
It's
And that
impossible
is
to grow.
why AI coaching as well. So I am in no way putting, like, I love AI. I use it all the time. I use it for gardening at the moment. I'm taking a photo of my plant that's dying and I'm like, why is this plant dying? Tell me what
That's a
to do to
great
bring it back to
idea.
life. I use it for everything. Like my son is like, can you ask your phone like why this is like we're getting,
Oh my
we
God.
definitely use it. But what I would say is it's funny because, there's a lot of discussion in the coaching world about AI and coaching and so on.
Mm,
And I think a lot of people in the initial days of ChatGPT, for example, were using it as a way to be coached and to use it instead of like paying for a personalized, like one-to-one type coach, a human coach. And it works to a certain degree because it will give you, like, it will
mm,
reword, reframe what you're saying to it, and then it will, reflect that back to you. And that's really important. And that's something that coaches do with great success. But what I think has become very clear to people who use AI is that it can be very, what's the word? Syncopathic or whatever. Like basically, they'll never challenge you. AI will never challenge you unless you
oh,
prompt it to challenge you. And then it's
mm,
like, is it really challenging you? So, like, just like you said, if you're in a coaching conversation with somebody who you've spent time with, you've shared who you are, they're holding space for you in a non judgmental, curious
mm,
way, they're present and they're devoted to your learning and development, and
mm,
they're skilled in recognizing patterns, which is a huge thing of coaching. Yes, AI can do that, but they're not going to be able to challenge you, and they're not going to be able to say, actually, do you remember, I remember 3 sessions ago you said that this was, for example, with you, entrepreneurship is really important to you because it's a way that you express your authentic gifts with the world. So
mm.
how does that belief line up with, I just want to be a copywriter, right? Like, remember when you were
Yeah.
kind of talking about that, and it's a way to be challenged using your own, self-disclosure, like what you've shared with the coach, and then they take it, they kind of run it through, their presence, their experience, their uniqueness as well, and it has to be a human
Mm.
dialogue, like it just has to be. So yeah, you just kind of reminded me of that. I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, because, well, yeah, I suppose it was exactly what we were just talking about, but you basically made me, not basically, you made me feel like it was possible. And we talk
Mm.
about this a lot, but it's like you gave me the permission, and I think a lot of women, we feel like we need to be given
Mm.
permission to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thank you for
I
that.
feel like you do that to me. I feel like you give that to me all the time. It's funny, we do that to each other because maybe I do that for you from a coaching lens, but like for the mindset stuff perhaps. But
Yeah.
then you totally do it for me in the LinkedIn world because we're both coming at it with different perspectives. And I'll never forget your first pilot of your LinkedIn program, and you actually did it again this week. It kills me, but in the best way. So obviously, like, I think you said this actually with your research, the number one reason why people don't post on LinkedIn is because they're afraid that someone is going to say they're cringe, right? Like they're
Yeah.
afraid that someone's going to be like, "Oh my God, how tragic for you."
Yeah.
Like that
Oh, Amy's
you would,
a life coach now, or Amy's an influencer now, and then it's like,
yeah,
who cares if
whatever,
they say that?
whatever anyone would say, right? Like, so, oh my God, look at that. Like, look, she's posting. Can you believe she's
I know.
speaking her
I'm
mind? You know,
mortified.
this ridiculous. Like, when you break it down, it's so ridiculous. But what I loved about what you did was you started off your session and you had that guy. Do you remember
The
that screenshot
meme.
of that guy? Really? Is that who I'm going to be limited by? Is that what's going to
Yeah.
drive my choices?
That's what you're dealing with though. When you break it down and you think about who are you worried about judging you? So
Yeah.
if it's like family and friends, okay, that's fair enough. They're judging you because they love you and they're judging you out of fear because they don't want you to embarrass yourself.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Protecting you.
Whatever. They're protecting you. Yeah.
They think they are, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. But like I'm just like don't tell them. Like if they see it and I say to my family like only give me feedback if it's constructive and if I can change it. Don't bother giving me feedback about anything else. I don't want to hear it. Don't comment on how I look. None of that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care. I don't want to know. But it's often it can be maybe someone that you were in school with that you were like
Yeah.
worried about what they think, or maybe it's an ex-colleague that was really judgmental. Like when you actually drill down into who are you scared of calling you cringe if you post on LinkedIn,
I know.
it is so interesting. That's why I think journaling as well, or having a thinking partner, or asking
Mm,
ChatGPT to challenge you, or whatever that looks like. And it's exhausting, like sitting down and going into your own psyche. But when
mm,
you actually tease it out, it's often just someone that you're like, I couldn't give a flying flip what this person thinks
mm.
of me. It is that feel the fear and do it anyway. And often, you know, you mentioned earlier this primal need of having to,
Yeah.
be in a pack
Belong.
and belong and be kind of accepted by everyone. And if we're not accepted and if we're kicked out of the pack and if someone does call us cringe, we interpret it as rejection. And then we're
Hmm.
kicked out of the pack and then we get eaten by lions. On a deep primal level, we need to be accepted. And that's why rejection, or when someone comments on some of our creative work, it can feel so unbelievably painful, and especially if
Mm.
you're neurodivergent. And I've been learning a lot since I got my ADHD diagnosis, like probably 2 years ago nearly now, about rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is
Mm.
basically that if you are neurodivergent, you often struggle if you perceive rejection. It's very, very hard to regulate yourself. Like I become
Hmm.
really deregulated if I perceive rejection. It's like this physical. I spoke to a friend about it the other day, and I was like, being in the if you're having a little bit of a disagreement with like your partner or your friend or a family member, and if you're kind of in the gray area with it, like I would ruminate over that for so long. But
Mm.
now that I understand myself a lot better, I find EFT very helpful now, tapping.
Mm.
So because it's my unconscious that's telling me that I'm being rejected and that's telling me that I'm unsafe. And when I do the tapping, it's just like, you're acknowledging. You can look at it up on YouTube. It's like super
Mm.
easy and it's so effective for anything like this. You can just completely regulate yourself because it helps you process the emotion. That is one of the biggest things that people struggle with, feeling like people are going to call them cringe, feeling like they have nothing to say within the noise of LinkedIn,
Yeah.
which is totally valid, which is another thing. We were talking a little bit about ChatGPT. So many people are writing content using ChatGPT, and honestly, it's just complete shite. Like I can tell straight
Yeah.
away if there's a ChatGPT post, and like I think you're better off actually not writing content than churning out a load of ChatGPT stuff. And I use it constantly. I use Gemini, I use Notebook LM, I use ChatGPT. I use all of them all the time. But for things that give me prompts or for
Yeah.
answering
Ask you
questions,
questions.
or if I have a
Mm.
client and their target audience is founders, I'm going to ask Gemini what are the top three things that founders are thinking about right now in the UK.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
Gemini can tell me. And then I can put that into their framework as their whatever the details of the problems their clients. And I can maybe ask some prompts about how they can help that client solve the problem based on the service that they're providing, to give them
Hmm.
ideas and prompts. So I think it's epic for prompts, but to actually write the content, because it's so diluted and it's so kind of not genuine because it's not your experience. It's just coming out of a machine.
Right.
And I think it's really important for us to draw on our own experience. But when you are putting yourself out there on LinkedIn, or you are becoming someone that wants to create content and build your brand on LinkedIn, it can be terrifying, because I know I had this fear for a long time, especially when I would write about stuff within the DE&I space. And I was
Mm.
like, I'm not a perfect person. I've said some bad things over the years. Of course I have. And how I got over that was I defined my tone of voice. And I decided that when I write stuff about inclusion in the workplace, I will write it from the perspective of, this was a mistake that I made before, or this was a belief that I had.
Mm.
And now that I learned X, Y, and Z, I now understand that this is like completely wrong. And I was really naive when I moved to London and I thought that everyone loved each other and that racism wasn't even a thing anymore or anything like that. I will always draw on my own shortcomings first. And I thought that will at least allow me to kind of speak to people on a level where it resonates with them and I'm not like preaching because I just
It's your
also think
unique
that's,
perspective, right? Like it's
yeah.
yours and it's coming from your lived experience. And, I do the same with my podcast, The 10 Minute Shift. So as a coach, I would never tell someone what to do. Like it's not about giving
Mm,
advice, it's about asking questions and evoking awareness to the point where the person feels empowered to make their own decision. Because who am I to tell someone what to do about their life? I'm an
yeah.
expert on my own life and I can share my experiences, like you've said, but it's certainly not my place to tell someone because there's so many assumptions like that I know better, that I know your inner world better than mine. Like it's madness. I would,
Mm,
would never do it. And so what I try and do with my podcast, and this does help a bit with the posting about it too, is, thinking about it as an offering. This is what works for me. Like there is no command here. There's no, there's a gentle invitation that if you want to maybe hear about my perspective
mm,
shift, I would love for you to join me. But if it doesn't resonate, that's okay too, right? We're all different. And actually something that you said about the feedback earlier resonated with me because in researching an episode around it, one of the things that really kind of connected with me was around how if people are giving you feedback, I think there was an example of somebody that we both know, and they were putting stuff out on LinkedIn, and someone said that they were cringe, and you said that they were just really projecting right their
mm.
own fears and their own inner world, and their because really like any feedback that you get from anyone is going to be already filtered through all their cognitive
Yes.
biases, all their belief systems, limiting or not, their unique life experience and lived experiences, which you have no maybe even knowledge of or understanding of. And so how could we possibly make other people the source of
Mm,
how we feel about something that we ourselves generate? Like it's just illogical. It doesn't make any
yeah.
sense. We have to be the
Yes.
source.
And especially if they don't understand the world, like if they're not out here creating content, someone that I care about recently launched a podcast and got a little bit of criticism from friends about the episode. And
Mm.
I was just like, do they have podcasts? I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, are they out here making podcasts? No. Okay. And end of sentence, end of discussion.
Yeah.
They don't get to give you like, yeah, unsolicited criticism or like, because I understand if someone is putting something out there and it's wild and like, if you care about them and you're like, I think you're losing your mind and you're talking about all this crazy stuff on your podcast, I think we need to
That might
rein
be a
you in a little
gift.
bit. So
Yeah.
there is some situations where people need an intervention, but I think we all have to, and that's why obviously we have the Bold Women WhatsApp group, which
Mm.
is a space where we all really encourage each other, and we give each other, of course, constructive feedback when we need to, when it's invited and when it's
Mhm.
solicited. And I think that's really powerful. And that is obviously as well a part of building confidence. But projection, because we are not perfect people and we
Mm.
have also judged other people. And
Totally.
now if I judge someone or if I get funny about something or something sets me off that I see, I just take a moment and I'm like, why is that bothering me that that person did
Mm.
that or that that person made that post about X, Y, and Z? And I just take a moment of reflection and I'm like, there's a reason that that's bothering me. And it's something to do with me. It's not something to do with them.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
just to flip that again around, that if someone is out here bashing you because you're posting on LinkedIn or you're making a podcast, like most of the time it's a them problem. And I'm not trying to
Yeah.
encourage people to be out here as narcissists being like, I do everything right and I'm great. And anyone that has a problem with me it's their problem. But very often it is a them problem. And
Mhm.
like if someone doesn't offer me something constructive and helpful, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
judgment. You could take that over to the corner. I don't want to hear about it. I don't care about it. You can get caught up in people's opinions and judgments
Mm.
and wanting to be liked and chosen by everyone. And that's just
Totally.
so exhausting. And a lot of people don't do this. Like, where do I want to be in 5 years' time? I didn't do this for years up until
Mm.
recently. Talk to me about becoming bold. What does it mean to you?
Well, I will say, and I think any woman that is after, their 40th birthday, I will say the good news is that your fucks just start completely evaporating, like they really do. And I think that that's just something to look forward to. And that helps, with
Yeah.
becoming bold because, you're busy and you've got a lot on, and you just, the opinions of others fall away because I think we do start having the more meaningful thoughts
Mm.
and conversations with ourselves, like you mentioned, around, okay, I'm at my midlife, like, who do I want to be? And also, one of the really big ones, who do I want to surround myself with? Because you touched
Mm.
on it with the Bold group. I truly believe that we almost become the energy that we surround ourselves with,
Absolutely.
and I find, I find negative energy quite challenging. I have an optimistic outlook, and that's not to say I try very hard not to veer into toxic positivity because I don't think that's helpful either.
Mm.
But having a growth kind of mindset, like, and I know it's almost a cliche now to say that, but there's a great book by a woman called Marilee Adams, and I use it a lot in my coaching, and it's called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. And it was absolutely transformative for me. And in this book, she talks about learner versus judger. And we all have it. Like, we all have our learner mode and we all have a judger mode for other people as well as for ourselves.
Mm.
And it's really powerful to be able to stop in any moment and say, am I looking at this from a judger lens or a learner
Mm.
lens? And
Wow.
judger is small and it feels restrictive and it feels
Mm.
tight and not good, basically. And
Mm.
then learner mode feels big and expansive and exciting and creative and maybe even fun and big and spacious. And so even if you just check in from a bodily perspective, move towards what feels good in your body, and I think
Mm.
it'll typically be that learner mode. So as I navigate this new phase in my career, I'm really working on bringing in a beginner's mind and not putting pressure on myself to be an expert. Yes, I have expertise. Yes, I've been in my, I'm bringing in things that I've a lot of experience in, which is necessary, I think, if I'm going to be building a business around it. But I'm also, really hoping to invite curiosity and a sense of playfulness, because that's really
Mm.
important to me, and just not taking myself so fucking seriously. Like, that is
Oh
really
my
important to
God.
me in terms of values. Like, it's just, for me anyway, so tedious to take myself so seriously. Like, I have
Yeah.
to be able to just laugh and just say, I'm just trying my best, like everybody out here, everyone
Yeah.
is. I really believe that. And so, yeah, it's, for me, being bold is inviting a sense of curiosity, playfulness, bringing my values in, and also stretching myself one little bit at a time. Because, you touched on this earlier, but if we move from our comfort zone right into our panic zone, like, there's
Mm.
three zones, and there's comfort zone, and in the middle there's the learning zone or the growth zone, and then on the far end there's the panic zone, where it's just like,
Mm.
oh my fucking god, what have I just done, kind of thing. And I think it's probably not a great idea to go into the panic zone because you may only do it once then. But what
Mm.
is a really good idea is to continually move into the growth zone or the learning zone by just small challenges, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're afraid of public speaking, speak a bit louder. You don't have to just schedule
Mm.
speaking in front of 1,000 people and scare the shit out of yourself. You just scare yourself a small bit, right? And every time you do that, you expand your comfort zone and it gets bigger. So again, for me, becoming bold, it's not about me jumping off the cliff into something that will paralyze me. And what that cliff is different for everybody. And so you need a level of self-awareness. But what I am committed to doing is trying and
Mm.
failing and making mistakes and not taking myself so seriously that I can't learn from them and be in this kind of beginner's mind where it's all just information, no matter what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think as well that becoming bold for me was very much a mindset. It's I'm going to allow myself to think really big things,
Mm.
that is bold. Like, I remember my friend Alex challenging me about how much money do I want to make every month. And I started really conservatively, and she was like, no, think really big, like go in hard. How much money do you really want to be making every month? And I just don't know why that, like, it's obviously, it's the famine trauma. It's something in women and Irish women, I don't know what it is, where we are just, not all of us, obviously I can't speak for every Irish woman, but there's definitely a sense of, I guess, yeah, probably maybe it's a little bit of a patriarchal culture.
Scarcity
Um,
too. We're taught
Scarcity,
scarcity. We're
yeah,
taught it.
yeah, it is the famine trauma. It is, honestly, and like colonialism, whatever. But there's definitely that generational trauma and thinking small and not, getting the notions that we want to be
Hmm.
earning the millions and be financially free. And it's even
Hmm.
scary to think those thoughts. Can you imagine that? It's terrifying to think that way. And I think
Hmm.
for me, like in the last year, I remember having this very strong shift, which was I started to think to myself, the money, I hated the last contract I was in. It was a super toxic environment. And I was just like, why am I here? I'm wasting my life. I started to tell myself in this one moment that the money that I was making every month from this very toxic job, I could actually make in a day. And when I had that shift, it just felt like everything changed because I
Hmm.
started to convince myself I will make this money in a day. And actually, about 4 months later, I made it in a day for the first
Nice.
time, and I was like, you see, it's actually possible. But
Hmm.
it would never have been possible if I didn't tell myself that it was possible and if I didn't allow myself to be bold with the way that
Yeah.
I was thinking. And we are our thoughts. All the buildings around you that you look at, all the skyscrapers, they all started off as thoughts in people's minds. Every single
Hmm.
thing in the world that we have, Riverside, what we're recording on, these mics, like this t-shirt, that was all a thought in someone's mind. It's about allowing yourself to think these things, first of all. And then the more you think about them, the more that they have potential to become a reality.
And it's the thoughts that you choose, because like, we are the awareness behind the thoughts. We're the ones that decide which thoughts get built.
Yes.
We're the ones that decide which thoughts come in and that stay a while versus the thoughts that we let go. So
Yeah.
we're more, we're the universe.
And you mentioned that a little while ago about the negative energy. For me, whenever I've been going through something that's been super challenging, I just think to myself, what can I do for myself today that's just going to move me a little bit forward? I still might feel like shit tomorrow. I might still be struggling with my mental health, but if I can just protect my mindset, if I can just avoid alcohol or avoid anything else that's going to affect me negatively, if I can make sure I'm getting enough sleep, at least if I can just keep going and keep the foundations strong, I know I will come out the other side. When your thoughts come in, it's about observing them rather than becoming them. And this was a huge learning for me. Like, if I have a negative thought, it's being like, okay, interesting that I'm having that really negative thought. I wonder why that
Hmm.
is. I was always really into trying to master my mind. And I feel like I'm at a point where, yes, of course, I still have low days and I get anxiety and whatever, as everyone
Hmm.
does in some way or
Hmm.
another. I just feel like I'm so much more in control of my thinking now. Doing the work, girl, doing the work.
What a great conversation. I think that we don't spend enough time in conversation with ourselves. And so to be able
Mm.
to kind of have this like discussion with you around confidence and what makes somebody bold and and it's funny, you said just there, and I noticed it, you said, I feel like I'm in more control of my thoughts. But what I would maybe say that I've noticed when you described that was accepting,
Yeah, accepting. Yeah.
yeah, you let it be, you give yourself permission to let
Mm.
it come in, and then you decide what to do with it.
Amy, thank you so much. I think we should maybe someday set up our own podcast called The Amy's from Cork. Do you think?
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe?
Amy squared.
Would that be cutesy? The Cork
If you
Amy.
think that we should do that, get in touch with Amy W and through the show notes, and we will do
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
if
we
there's
should, I
enough
think.
interest.
The Corkons. We've also had a super similar life experience, the nomads
Yeah,
that we are. Amy, thank
yeah.
you so much. You are amazing and you've changed my life, genuinely.
Oh, well, right back at you. Thank you for having me.